Today on Locked On Canadiens, it is a Tank Bowl special and an AHL trade.
You are Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 1028 of your first listen of the day. As you know, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where you get your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. My name is Laura Saab, also known as The Active Stick, and I'm joined, as always, by the wonderful Scott Mella of Habs Eyes on the Prize, and we have a lot of Laval talk to do. We are going to do our belated 3 up and 3 down. We're going to talk about that trade, but first, Scott, how are you on this in Montreal? It's a nice, pleasant, warm Monday evening.
It was cold, chilly, and daylight savings is throwing me off on everything because I get home at the time I normally am and the sun's starting to set. So it's like walking the dog while the sun is setting and it's cold and it's chilly. And then all of a sudden it's almost 7 o'clock and the sun is still out while I'm making dinner. So I am bewildered mostly in terms of that. But overall, can't complain. Trying to keep up with the first day of NHL or NFL free agency has been it's been a struggle because there's a lot. If you think NHL free agency, the trade deadline is nuts. NFL free agency, which you can go check out all the Locked On NFL podcasts for that, was bonkers in every single sense of the word today.
The group chat was filled with words I didn't understand and names I've never heard in my life. And this time of year honestly always throws me off because mentally it's much nicer because the sun is out longer, but physically, I'm so tired. The week after we change the clocks, I'm always exhausted. Anyway, we're not here to talk about our well-being. We are here to talk about the Canadiens' well-being, specifically in the tank battle / the draft lottery odds and stuff. And so the Canadiens have already announced that Caden Primo will be starting against the Blue Jackets. That is something that, Scott, you predicted on yesterday's episode. What else do you think we can expect in the tank bowl? Do you think things get more intense or less intense when two teams who want to lose are playing each other?
I think this is going to be it's going to be bad hockey, I think, in a lot of ways. I said this in our group chat, is that Caden Primo is either 5 goals against or almost flawless, minus a hiccup here or there. Columbus is sitting on 54 points, 22, 32, and 10 on the season, 64 games played, 4 points ahead of the Habs in the tank battle. So getting Columbus 2 points in this would be huge for the Canadiens to get within striking distance of the top 4. But Columbus has actually kind of gone through something the Canadiens have as well, is that their top line in the second half of the season has decided that actually we're going to be really good now in terms of Slav, Suzuki, and Caulfield. Their line with Johnny Gaudreau has really kind of turned a corner there. I'm really curious to see what we get out of this. Columbus didn't really add anybody at the deadline. The Canadiens didn't really add anybody at the deadline. I'm really interested to see kind of how this game goes. I'm not expecting good hockey, mind you, but I'm expecting this to be oddly physical, as some of these games usually are.
Scott, I'm actually glad you brought that up because we didn't touch on it on our last episode, but the top line is second only to Columbus. And we are going to get into this in our 3 up segment, obviously. But Columbus and Montreal, just like everyone predicted, would be the top even strength line. Or is it I think they were measuring top lines versus top lines, and Montreal's and Columbus's are at the top of the charts for the last, I want to say 20 games or 30 games. It was something incredible, this incredible number. And we are going to get into that. It's just amazing that when you are a team that is in that situation where you're trying to tank and you're trying to rebuild, some things are going right. It's just that it's just a symbol, or it's emblematic of how much further you have to go to build out a team. Like you cannot win in hockey with one good line. That's not how it works. You need to have depth. And we talk a lot about depth. You have to have quality depth too, because that is something that Toronto, for example, is always bad at. They can get depth. That's fine. They have people. They have human beings in those spots. It's just, are they better quality than the teams that they're facing? Are they able to keep up with the game? So like that's something for me. Like the reason that I like comparing these two teams is one, we really love our counterpart on Locked On Blue Jackets, Jay Foster, who many of you will know because he is sometimes on this show, but never when Scott is around. But I also do think that like this is the fun part where things aren't fully set. So you can predict and you can have like really high expectations and really high hopes. Like our hope ceiling is really high. But let's get back to the game for a second. After those top two lines, there's not necessarily a whole lot out there. And I do know that Columbus, like Montreal, has faced a lot of injuries on their defense as well. They faced a lot of injuries in general. Like these teams have a lot of parallel lives things going on. But their defense also, like for me, it doesn't necessarily scare me all that much. And this is going to be famous last words, and they're going to be a wall tomorrow.
I mean, probably that's just the way it goes. I was looking at that stat too for top lines, and the Gaudreau, Jenner, Roslovic line has 14 goals since the All-Star break when that thing was posted. Admittedly, they've now traded Jack Roslovic since then, so that changes things. This is all going to be about who can get their depth going first. And if their website would load, I would tell you who I am expecting, to score goals on their team here. There we go. Finally, Jesus. The NHL websites work great, everybody. Johnny Gaudreau leads the team with 45 points in 64 games. Zach Werenski, 38 points in 52. Kirill Marchenko, 32 and 61. They do not score a lot of goals. Dmitry Voronkov, who got in a fight with Arbor Jacki in the earlier game this season, has been a surprising piece. 31 points in 58 games. Boone Jenner, the captain, 29 points in 49. They don't score a ton of points, if we're being very, very honest here. But this is also a team that is, and I think Jay would agree with us here, undergoing a lot of identity crisis. They had the whole Mike Babcock thing, fired him, hired Pascal Vincent, that was supposed to be kind of like a, hey, this is a guy who's done well in the AHL. This should be good for a young team. And then has gone so far old school with everything that it is hamstrung the team. You've seen Adam Fantilli scratched for no reason. You've seen prospects sent down to the AHL for no reason. You've seen players who are playing well on this team scratched or benched or just not playing. And it feels like the morale around the team is very, very low. I'm just looking at the point totals on this team, and it's not great across the board. Elvis Merzlikins and Danil Tarasov have done about as well as they could expect behind this team here. This should be a game the Canadiens probably win, even though fans want them to lose. But out of everything in this, the last time the Habs played a game they should have won and did win, they came out and played terribly against Arizona. This is a team right in that spot there. They've played well against Toronto, against all the teams in the lead up to that. Can they play well and win in this game? Which is exactly the kind of thing that they would deserve in this, is show me that you've learned that you can put away teams that you are better than. Yes, we want this team to lose games, but if they come out and are like, we put our foot down 60 minutes, full effort, I'm not going to be upset if they win this game. I want to see Suzuki and Caulfield on the board. I want to see Slavkovsky on the board. I want to see a strong game from the defense, keeping shots away from Caden Primo, playing with structure and playing the way that we've seen them play really well in recent games. But we know they always tend to play down to their opponent. This has all the markings of like a 4-2, 5-3 kind of game in either direction. It can go very quickly in either direction because both these teams, when they're feeling it, they can put up goals. When they're not, they are borderline unwatchable, unfortunately.
And that's the thing. So, like, what I'm hoping for from this game, as Scott said, we want to see an effort, but I want to see what else is out there. And you're gonna see a theme in our 3 up as well. I want to be saying new things. I want to be saying good things about new people is essentially it. I want to see something else develop. I want to see something else move forward, take steps forward. Like that's what I'm looking for really in this situation. All right. So it is Tuesday. It's not Monday. It's technically Monday when we're recording this, but we haven't done our 3 up and 3 down because we were doing trade deadline grading. So we're going to start as usual. We're going to do our makeup 3 up and 3 down. We're going to start as usual with the 3 down. But it's not all bad because then we will have the 3 up, and that's coming up in just one moment. But first, this episode is brought to you by Sleeper. We are almost at the end of the NHL season. I believe, Scott, you said there's 18 games, including this Columbus one, left. And regardless of where we are in the current standings, I want to remind everybody that you could win big by playing daily fantasy hockey on Sleeper, the official daily fantasy app of the Locked On NHL Network. Sleeper is our number one choice for daily fantasy sports and especially daily fantasy hockey because with Sleeper, you can win 100 times your cash in daily fantasy hockey contests. And honestly, like it's really easy to use. You can play daily fantasy NFL, NBA, MLB, CFB while they're in season. Right now, the NHL is in season, so be playing that. And you could win 100 times your money, as I said. All you got to do is pick a player, a couple of players, and you'll have to decide whether they will record more or less than their sleeper projections for things like goals, assists, saves, plus minus, and more in any given game. And to win 100 times your cash, you need to correctly predict the outcome of 8 player stats. You heard me, Canadians fans. You can win 100 times your money by playing daily fantasy hockey with Sleeper. So start paying attention and nail your picks so you can start winning big. Use promo code LOCKEDONNHL and you'll get up to a $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. That's code LOCKEDONNHL. See Sleeper's terms of use for details and locational availability. And now it is time for our 3 up and 3 down. And we always start with a 3 down so that we can end the show on a positive note. Scott, we're talking about fourth line woes. I know we're gonna be talking about Laval a lot this episode. What do you have for your 3 down? Because I just had the Calgary Flames and their trading market.
I mean, the Flames
Trade
are on there
deadline.
because they just decided to throw everything out the window at the trade deadline and get nothing. Not quite as bad as the Sharks and not quite as confusing as the Devils across the board, I think, on that. I think for me, the Canadiens is that it's odd that the fourth line was an area that usually in their limited minutes put together pretty decent numbers in the earlier parts of the season. And recently, it feels a lot like there's just not much there for them, unfortunately. They're not getting scoring chances. They're not putting up points. Part of that is they have a winger playing center because Colin White is injured, though White should be back this week, I believe. It's been a week since he was put on IR. That likely means Tanner Pearson or Michael Bozzetta, I assume, will take a seat in the press box for that. I think part of it is, yes, Yolonen didn't take the next step this year that we wanted to and that I was hoping for. He seemed to go through a little bit of Charles Hudon syndrome where they had a very good first season on a team that was poor, seemed earmarked for a middle 6 spot. Yes.
Let me ask though, is it because the Canadians are not playing him enough?
I think he just hasn't done enough with the opportunities given him to there. The defensive efforts haven't been good, but again, this is a team that is struggling. It's unfair to put it all on him, but he hasn't gone out of his way to really seize that spot, so to speak, here. I think that there's a talented player there. I just do not know if that's going to be in Montreal long term now. It reeks a lot of, hey, this is a guy who's probably going to get shipped out at the draft or in free agency as an RFA and an RFA for RFA swap there just to kind of bring someone new in. It's Colin White is Colin White. It's fine. They just desperately need a natural center on that line, and they don't have one, and they're not going to be, they can't go out and just get one now because it's past the trade deadline. Overall, I think that's the most disappointing. Like we've seen Josh Anderson play well now, and I can't complain about that in the last week. But if the fourth line could just take some of the minutes without being just a complete waste of, 8.5 minutes a night, like the odd goal would go a long way, I feel like. it feels a lot like they are trapped out there. Sometimes it's a defensive zone clear doesn't get out. Sometimes it's just they're not in the right spots. And it turns into a penalty kill because eventually they have to go jump out there and realize, oh, I hooked this guy, I held this guy because I can't get the puck back. I can't get it out of the zone. And we know that it inevitably leads to, oh, they've been scored on again. What a surprise.
And that's the other thing too, is that we talked a lot about, Jake Allen's woes, or Samuel Montembeau's heroics, or Caden Primo's sort of uneven but much better than last year. And a lot of that is the team as a whole is not good defensively. And a large part of that is your bottom two lines. So just like we said, Toronto can get guys to be in that depth. You have to get good guys. Like you said, there needs to be a natural center at that position. There needs to be fourth liners who are good at being fourth liners in those positions. And that's not something that, right now, the Canadiens, it's not killing them because they're in a rebuild year anyway, and that's better for their draft position. But like when they're a team that's going to try and make the playoffs, when they're poised to contend, like you really need to figure that out.
And because look at when the Canadiens went deep in 2021, their fourth line was Yoel Armia, Corey Perry, and Eric Stahl. That's an embarrassment of riches, admittedly. Yes, is that Armia was on a cheaper deal. They could afford Stahl on a next to nothing vet min contract. Same with Corey Perry. But at the same time, a well-structured fourth line and bottom six that can eat some of those minutes, not get scored on, and get off the ice is all you could ask for. Sometimes it is win this face-off, get the puck into the offensive zone, get a stoppage, other line goes out there, done. Go out, kill a couple penalties, that sort of thing. And it's been a struggle this year because injuries are a part of it. Jake Evans is usually a bottom six center playing top 6 minutes for this team because they don't have any other natural centers on this team. It's not something I want them to be like, Kent, go out and address the fourth line. No, I don't give a crap if he addresses the fourth line in free agency or not. That shouldn't be the top thing on his list. But I think getting a stable, defensively responsible fourth line center there is going to do a lot of wonders for this team next year. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. Can you win some faceoffs, occasionally chip in a goal? That's all we're asking. We're not seeing that from this group. There are guys that work hard. Harvey Pinard works hard. Michael Pezzetta works hard. Sooner or later, you need something beyond, we worked hard.
Yes.
Okay. What do you have to show for it? You have like a 17 expected goals for percentage. You didn't get that many scoring chances or create much of anything. Why are we besides injuries, what is your purpose in the lineup here? What have you done to keep this spot? And in most years, I imagine it would have changed by now, but there's just not the bodies for it right now. And especially with how much they've struggled defensively as a team as a whole.
Right. And I think like that's the big thing, is that like you're talking about like what is the purpose of being there? For me, it's like usually you want your fourth line not to stand out, right? Like if they're standing out, it's usually a problem. But there is such a case of blending in too much, right? They're completely like, and that's the thing. It's like it sucks because they do work hard. You have to have that talent too. And you also have to be doing the right things. You could be working really hard at simply doing the incorrect things. So like for me, that's a big thing. Scott, did we have anything else for our downs this week other than, the trade losers? And
I mean, I want to give a special shout out to the Philadelphia Flyers here. This news broke today that the Flyers waived Ryan Johansson in part due to his complicated history with John Tortorella, who got thrown off the bench in the last game, and because they had hard feelings towards the agent that Johansson shares with former Flyers prospect Cutter Gauthier. And to me, I look at that and I go, that's embarrassing as an organization that you traded for a player knowing that your coach does not get along with him, and then are seemingly punishing him by waiving him and sending him to the AHL because he shares an agent, not that he is this player. And that's part of it. It's so beyond Bush League that having that be out there, I'm wondering if the NHLPA is going to be like, really? This isn't fair to our client here as part
did
of
they
that.
actually say that?
it was implied by Jeff Merrick about why Ryan Johansson was immediately waived and not even given a look there for that. So
Wow.
there's going to be some discussions about that, I imagine.
And talk about John Tortorella, like refusing to leave a game, getting ejected. I believe he got suspended. Did he not?
2 games.
2 games. Yeah. I mean, that's a thing. Like people like John Tortorella is entertaining for other fans, but at some point you got to say that all of this stuff, like it's not worth it, right? Like he's not bringing you Stanley Cups anymore. If he was constantly winning, then he'd be able to cover a lot of stuff up like Mike Babcock. But these shenanigans, like I do love that he defends his players, but at the same time, on the flip side of that, there's like a player he doesn't like, so that player gets waived. Like you have to equally fight for every single one of your players. If you're a coach, no matter what, you can't play favorites. You can have favorites, you just can't treat them like it, right? And like to me, that just feels like coaching 101. Anyway, all this to say is that like John Tortorella is entertaining to watch as an opposing team fan. In the meantime, it's not all bad. We do have some ups, and it's like I feel like it's a good week for ups, and we're gonna get into them so you can enjoy them with us right in one moment. This episode is also brought to you by eBay. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the price you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. All right, Scott, it's time to turn that frown upside down. And I can't believe I just said that. I should be fired. And talk about 3 ups. So first, let's get into the AHL trade that was made.
So earlier today, around lunchtime, the Canadiens traded forward Nathan Legare to the Utica Comets, aka the New Jersey Devils, in exchange for forward Arnaud Durando. Durando was traded from Bridgeport, the Islanders organization, to the Devils organization earlier this year. And Legare came over this summer in Jeff Petrie trade part 2 Electric Boogaloo. It's an AHL only deal because this took place after the NHL trade deadline. Neither player is eligible to play in the NHL for the rest of this season. However, they are both eligible for the Calder Cup playoffs if their teams qualify, which for the Rocket, they are slowly working on right now. I don't know a ton about Durando off the top of my head, and I know that he is outscoring Nathan Legale this season, but he comes from the Halifax Mooseheads organization. He's a 2017 draft pick. Nothing flashy in the QMJHL in his time there. He was just under a point per game. Has come in, bounced between the ECHL and the AHL. Hasn't played badly. Seems like a pretty solid depth addition. In 68 games last year, the Bridgeport Islanders, he had 55 points. This season with the Comets, he has 14 points in 26 games, 4 points in 12 games with the Islanders. We'll see where he slots in the lineup. The Rocket play again on Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday this week. I'm excited. Him and Jacob Perreault are new blood in here that are just, I think, maybe a better fit for this lineup and how they want to play. Less penalties, more potential scoring. So nothing crazy. There really isn't much to say about this. But if you are wondering about the AHL trade deadline is this upcoming Friday as well. So if there are pieces still being moved around, the Rocket and GM John Sedgwick have until Friday to finalize that.
And so, speaking of Laval, how hopeful are we now? I know you said they're slowly creeping back, but you said they had a dominant weekend.
They did, and of course, it was the games that I I was unable to watch the one on Saturday, but this weekend they came into this having lost their last few games. They lost to the Crunch in overtime on Wednesday, which was frustrating in and of itself. And then welcome the top team in the division to town. Cleveland leads the AHL North Division, or did, alongside Syracuse. And I thought if the Rocket don't win either of these games, it's probably it. The Rocket went 2-0 against the Monsters this weekend, scored 9 goals, gave up 4 only. They sit 3 points out of a playoff spot behind the Toronto Marlies and the Belleville Senators. Belleville has a game in hand. The Marlies have 2 games in hand. The Rocket play 2 more games against Belleville, 6 more for whatever godforsaken reason against the Senators this season. The Rocket need to take 30. There needs to be a combination of they have gained 36 points and the teams in front of them that they are chasing have lost that amount. Basically, they cannot lose any of those games to Toronto or Belleville to have a hope there. But this weekend was all about 2 players. Brandon Gignac put up 7 points in 2 games this weekend, and Logan Mailloux continued to have a really strong weekend on the blue line there.
It seems like he's finding his way without Jack-Eye.
He seemed to have turned a corner a little bit in the last couple of weeks here. Less penalties, less nonsense, more focused on doing the things offensively, less hero puck when things get bad. He still has some of those tendencies, but he is creeping more and more towards being a more regularly responsible defenseman. I don't think he needs to go up to the NHL this year. I think that is one for next season. You give him a shot to try and make that team out of camp to see if he beats out a vet. But for right now, leave him be to cook the way that he is right now, because the steps forward are there. There's still work to be done. However, my main up for this with the Rocket for this week was as Brandon Gignac plays well, the team seems to turn that corner there, because 7 points in 2 games over the weekend after kind of being relatively quiet after being sent back down after signing that deal and going up to the NHL. You could see it in the team that they weren't getting that same offensive push, that same oomph behind it. He took off scoring, and you get more points from Sean Farrell and Xavier Simoneau and the defense. We're going to see more potentially from Jacob Perreault, now Arnaud Durando this weekend. Can they make it happen?
So my main up for this week is kind of an honorary up rather than obviously the top line, blah, 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 is Josh Anderson. Didn't make me want to throw things at my TV the last couple of games. I think that counts. It merits an up.
His game against the Leafs was surprisingly good. Like, he was at the top of not only he wasn't on the score sheet, but on top of all the counting stats and everything. And he was
getting in their faces.
He's almost never there for any game at all this season. I thought he played really, really well in that role there. I'm trying to think. My other up is I'm struggling to think of it, just because there were a few games last week, and we've talked about the top line so much, and it's hard not to. When Slavkovsky is playing well, when Cole Caulfield is setting career highs in assists, when Nick Suzuki is trending towards a career season, it's hard to not just talk about the top line all the time, partially because there is no one else. But I'm going to give one of my other ups to Yoel Armia, who, I know we talked about this in the recap and everything, but he is someone who is quietly just putting together what you would want from a bottom 6 forward winger here. Smart defensively, pretty good penalty killer, scores like we were talking about with that fourth line. He contributes goals from time to time that help kind of separate this team here a little bit.
So as you were saying, this level of play is where Yoel Armia needs to be going forward. And that's the thing. I think this is the forward that they thought they were getting when they re-signed him. I still think that contract is a little bit much for somebody whose ceiling is the bottom 6. But as a bottom 6 forward, he does bring the quality. And I also, I was going to give him kind of an honorary up. My hope is that, now that they potentially might not trade him, given they have one remaining retention spot only after July 1st, I think that they would try to focus the trade on either Anderson or Dvorak or somebody like that. If he's going to stay, then I would like him to play like this for the entire year. And that's the most I can hope for him.
If he can play like this next year, I don't think it'll be an issue trading him going into the trade deadline or even before that. Teams are always looking for penalty killers, guys who can eat up defensive zone minutes, occasionally score goals. They love, I don't want to call it a role player, but almost like a role player, is that he's overpaid for what he is right now. I get why they gave him the contract coming off that season where it looked like, oh, he turned a corner, hit another level. He's not that guy, but there is still value in what he is bringing to this team. And I think that is so crucially important for the Canadiens this year, is that it's not a ton of goals, but they're still important. And it's every little step forward helps towards either moving contracts or making it more palatable to have them around going into next season too.
And that's going to be it for us for today. Obviously, we'll be back with a recap of the Blue Jacket game and some other fun stuff. And I am lining up guests for next week. So we've got a lot of fun stuff planned. So make sure you are subscribed to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube. Like I said, we're free and available wherever you get them. Also, you can find us on social media. On Twitter, we're at LO_Canadians. Scott and I are individually all over social media. I'm at The Active Stick. He's at Scott Metla. If you want to get in touch with us, lockedoncanadians@gmail.com is a great way to do it. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will talk to you tomorrow.